Hello, and my name is Pete Rushmer, and I'm your host today of A Half Dozen Things podcast. A Half Dozen Things is a podcast for business owners just like you. Whether you're an underdog hungry for success, or you're already smashing it but want to continue to level up, we are here each week for you to get insight and learning from the very best in the business. No fluff, no BS, and no self-proclaimed gurus talking about how easy business or life is. Mike, thank you for joining me today on Half Dozen Things podcast. I really appreciate it. For the listeners, I heard Mike speak at the Road Transport Expo recently. Can't believe it's over a month already since the Road Transport Expo. That's flown by, hasn't it? But Mike, it was really interesting listening to you at the Road Transport Expo, and he talked more about NaVCIS. So for the benefit of the listeners, are you able to just sort of outline sort of your role within NaVCIS and what NaVCIS is really, so people can sort of get their heads around what it is? Because I think a lot of people have heard of it, but maybe don't fully understand what the service is.
Yeah, morning, Peter. Thanks for the kind invitation in relation to speaking this morning on the Half Dozen Things podcast. For people on the podcast, my name's Mike Dawber. I'm a serving police officer, and I work for the National Vehicle Crime Intelligence Service, or NaVCIS. My role is Field Intelligence Officer for all things to do with heavy goods vehicle, freight, and cargo crime. I've got coming up to 20 years service in the police. And prior to starting the role with NaVCIS, which is 4 years ago, I was stolen vehicle officer at Cheshire Police, examining stolen vehicles for the best part of nearly 15 years. And I moved over to do freight and cargo crime 4 years ago. NaVCIS is a national police unit. We're based at the College of Policing at Wrighton-on-Dunsmore near Coventry. We've got a chain of command, so we've got a detective chief inspector who's the head of unit, and we've got lots of different areas in our business. So we've got an intelligence hub, we've got officers that look at plant and agricultural machinery, theft and crime. We've got ports officers at dedicated ports, so they're police officers that are opening up shipping containers. We've got a leisure desk, so we've got an officer that looks at caravan and motorhome theft, and then there's a team of officers that look at vehicle finance fraud, and then I front up the freight and cargo crime desk. In terms of freight and cargo crime, the terms of reference for my role is that we look at any theft of and theft from any vehicle 7.5 tons and above. So we don't currently touch or look at the 3.5 ton courier type parcel delivery van thefts. It's all big lorries and bulk thefts. And I'm here to give you an overview as to the work that we've been undertaking. So thanks for having me.
I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you. That's I think it's sort of fascinating when you sort of speak about it. Interestingly, actually, one of my colleagues yesterday, and I sort of chuckled to myself when I was prepping for today's conversation. So one of my colleagues has found out their car's gone into the garage, and they've had a phone call from a local police officer, and it turns out they've owned the car for 5 years. Car was stolen like 8 years ago, and they bought it on Auto Trader, and all the chassis numbers had been changed and everything. It's taken ages to track it down, and I just find it fascinating. So all of a sudden, what she thought was her car is actually owned by an insurance company who have paid out their policy holder who had it stolen like 8 years ago, which I found sort of really, really interesting, considering we were having a conversation. This was your bag. This was your bag for a while before, Mike. So, okay, so you sort of heavily focused on the 7.5 ton plus. So people will think about with trucks things like diesel theft and curtains being cut and things being, goods being stolen from curtains. Is that the sort of thing you're dealing with? And what about things like movement of like people and that sort of thing coming into the country when people sort of stow themselves away? Is that your sort of remit as well?
It all centers around acquisitive crimes or thefts. So we don't look at your clandestine entries or drug importations. It's all to do with thefts of and thefts from lorries. So last year we received 4,400 notifications of all types of UK HGV freight and cargo crime. Encompassed in that is the diesel thefts from lorries. So last year we received more than 1,000 notifications of diesel being stolen from heavy goods vehicles. We was either notified, involved with, assisted with 194 arrests just for national lorry crime. We took more than 500 police enquiries, and probably the same again from business and industry. So we do a lot of liaison with haulage companies, cargo surveyors, and cargo insurers. And the big stat for us last year was that we supported 45 policing operations just around cargo crime and heavy goods vehicle crime.
Wow. All I can say is, wow, the numbers are just astonishingly huge, aren't they? Like, it must be just, I know we were talking sort of before we started recording, but the volume of your workload must be horrendous. Nearly 4,500 notifications. I can't even do the maths on how many that is a day, but it's huge, right?
It's usually around 12 or 13 notifications a day when we divide it all up by 365 days a year. But one of the main reasons for me being brought into the National Vehicle Crime Intelligence Service was to more accurately map the threat from UK cargo crime. So when I came into post in 2018, I was tasked with trying to gather as much intelligence and as much data as I could and we get our notifications from police forces, loss adjusters, cargo surveyors, cargo insurers, general haulage companies send us notifications of thefts to do with trucks and lorries. And the reason for doing that was that at present, there's no Home Office crime classification code or Home Office counting code for a supply chain theft or a logistics theft. So we have to manually harvest as much data as we can to try to get a more accurate picture of what's occurring across the UK. It's by no means a full picture, and it can never really be without that Home Office counting code. And what you need to remember is that cargo crime comes in lots of different formats. And I know that you touched on it before, Peter. Curtain slashings, bolt croppings of trailer doors. We've got a series on at present of trailer hookup thefts, diesel thefts, as we've mentioned, load frauds using haulage exchanges to do bogus collections or fictitious carrier ones. So there's lots of different offences that all encompass cargo crime. And like I say, I know we understand it's by no means a full picture, but we are the envy of our colleagues in Europe with how much data we've collected. And when we look at comparisons between our European counterparts, I think Germany year on year usually report around 3,000 notifications a year, which will be on par or on comparison with the same as what we're recording or what notifications we're receiving in this country. So that was the first objective, and then the other objectives that I have to work to are around supporting police forces around intelligence-led targeted operations. I mentioned that we supported 45 operations last year. Make no mistake, I don't get an easy ride from some people in the haulage sector or particular drivers sometimes when they say, oh, well, we're not happy with the police, how they deal with some of these incidents and whatever else. But I must say, there's an awful lot of good work that's going on across the UK. I mentioned that last year we supported 194 arrests just for cargo crime last year. We supported 45 policing operations. And don't get me wrong, there is more that can be done, but there is an awful lot of work that's going on. So that was the second objective. And then the last objective was working in partnership with business and industry to try to either prevent or detect incidents of UK cargo theft. So that's the roadmap of everything that I have to stick to.
Yeah, it's a big remit, isn't it, Mike? And with regards to the data, Is the number of cargo and freight crimes increasing year on year? Is that a statistic you're seeing? And then the impact you're having, so the number of arrests and the policing ops now that you're sort of organising things more, is that sort of improving year on year as well?
It's difficult to gauge year on year at present because we set this piece of work up in 2018, so it's only been going for 4 years. So in 2017, the year before we started this piece of work, NaVCIS received 1,530 notifications of all types of UK cargo crime. The year after, we reported 2,967 offences, and that was because we improved in our we invested more resource into being able to collect and more accurately map that threat.
That makes sense,
by 2019, we've received 4,364 notifications, and that came to a combined cost price loss value of 115 million. And that's cost price loss value, and they're all estimates, but that growth in the number of offences wasn't because there'd been an increase in offences. It was just that we'd invested in being able to more accurately collect more data and map the threat more accurately. We've started seeing year on year now the same numbers, and it's coming around the 4,000 mark each year. And until we've got a consistent approach to crime recording, a Home Office crime classification code, and we've got consistent figures over quite a few numbers of years, that would give us, we'd be able to more accurately gauge whether there's been an increase or reduction, whether it's stable or whatever. So in answer to your question, we've got the most accurate picture in the UK, but it's difficult to estimate whether there's been an increase or a decrease in offences.
That makes sense. But the positive thing is the intelligence has improved massively with the data, and then that can only then go on to improve results moving forward, can't it? If we've got a better picture of the landscape, you need to have that data, don't you?
Yeah, without our input, this would largely remain an unnoticed problem for hauliers and the transport companies. We're heavily supported by the Road Haulage Association, who are one of our sponsors. The British International Freight Association also support us with our work. But in the UK at present, there's a number of organised crime groups that are causing threat, risk and harm from UK cargo theft. There's organised crime groups based in West Yorkshire, the West Midlands, Liverpool, Essex, that are turning the hand to this criminality and committing curtain slashings, bolt croppings of trailer doors, and doing hookup theft. So, as I said to you earlier, 194 arrests last year. Last week we was assisting South Yorkshire Police in relation to some recoveries, some warrants that they executed, and we, through our work and our collection of the data, we identified between us 5 lorry loads of stolen goods. So it just, there's, for people on the podcast, there's no harm at all in letting us, hopefully, touch wood, you won't have any thefts or losses. But if you do, and you do become a victim, there's no harm in, first of all, obviously letting your local police force know and reporting it, so they can start doing the primary investigation. But please let us know at NaVCIS, because we're involved in some cross-border national operations. We routinely get call-outs to go and assist police forces with operations and warrants, search warrants of premises. And something that I didn't mention before is that the way that we're set up with our data collection is that we might get a notification this morning that there's been a curtain slashing at, let's say, and I'm just pulling this one out, a motorway service station on the M1 motorway. 9 times out of 10, that notification, when it comes from an individual police force, will have skeleton information attached to it. It'll probably just say it's happened at this service station on the M1 northbound motorway. It was a curtain slashing between 10 last night and 7 this morning. And a lot of the time when we get reports of these thefts, it will say goods unknown. Driver didn't know what he was carrying or she was carrying. We upload that onto the database as an early first notification. And then in the days, weeks, sometimes months that follow, we'll get a secondary notification about that same theft. And that'll come from either a cargo insurer, a loss adjuster, a business, a trade association that say, do you know about this incident that was reported at whatever service station it was on whatever date? And here are the exact brand, commodity, cargo details with an inventory of what's been stolen. We can then go back into our national database that we manage, update the records, and we put in exact products, brand numbers, serial numbers, and then that comes really valuable, not just for a policing purpose with the operations that we support, but also for risk management purposes. So we put out a fortnightly freight crime intelligence bulletin that goes out to our business members and sponsors. It also goes out to police and law enforcement so they can keep an eye on incidents that are occurring. But not only that, we also put out a monthly, a quarterly, and an annual cargo crime report for our business members and sponsors, and that becomes valuable for risk managers who are involved in supply chain when it comes to looking at what goods are being stolen across certain routes, etc., and making informed decisions about routes to take or places to avoid. So that is really where we sit.
Wow. That's it's incredible to think, because I suppose the incident happens on a local level, so it's so important to have that national overview. And then the more data you're getting, because you're never going to get all the data you need straight away, it's about making sure you've got that feed of data through the cycle of an insurance claim process, for example, around the goods, around what's happened, what occurred when, and then that data, you're gathering that data then to be able to spot trends and pick up organised crime and that kind of thing off the back of it. So it's really valuable stuff, isn't it? Fantastic.
Hey, just very quickly before we move on to your next subject, last year we got a call out in August last year from the police in Bradford in West Yorkshire. The CID there rang us up to go out to do with having a look at some goods in 2 warehouses. We ended up identifying it was around 20 lorry loads of stolen goods. The DCI, when we debriefed it at Bradford Police, said that if it wasn't for NaVCIS intervention and assistance, they probably wouldn't have been able to identify the goods, and they'd probably have had to have shut the doors and walked away from the premises. And that's why it's really, really valuable that we are informed of whatever the commodity, the goods, the brand. We are a police unit. It's all, we understand business integrity and security and confidentiality. So, as I say, for anyone who's on the podcast, if you become a victim, we've probably either already been notified by a police force, a cargo insurer of that loss. But there's, as I said, we'd rather be told 2 or 3 times than not be told at all. There's no harm in letting us know that what the commodity was or what the product was, and letting us know.
Yeah, got you. That moved me on to a question that was I saw in your slides that we spoke about before the session, and that was this sort of bringing this to life for people listening about specific cases. You shared a case where there was a perfume which was sort of fairly specific, a new product into market. It had its own packaging, etc. And you soon picked up people reselling it on eBay. Are you able to just sort of talk through sort of what that operation looked like, if that's okay?
I can. So again, I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that previous to doing cargo theft, I was involved with stolen vehicles, stolen plant machinery. When I came over to do cargo theft, I quickly found out that cargo theft is different than other vehicle crime types, in that when you're dealing with stolen cars or stolen tractors or stolen diggers, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, you're looking for one big lump of shiny, expensive metal on 4 wheels. We know that cars get cut up and for parts and slaughtered, and that's a different story. However, I quickly found with cargo is that once it's stolen, if you don't get to it in those golden hours after the theft, or you don't find the storage location where certain stolen cargoes are being stored, they all re-enter the supply chain in lots of different places. So we see stolen cargoes appearing in lots of online auction sites, eBay, Gumtree, Facebook buy, sell or swap, car boot sales, Sunday markets. I've been out on call outs to cash converters stores before in the past. General shops and convenience stores. Some goods will re-enter the supply chain in those that are stolen. Backstreet cash and carries, and such like. So one of the challenges that I found straight away with dealing with cargo theft is once it's stolen, it just fragments and it can appear in lots of different places all at the same time. So to give you an example of that, we got a call out. It was just before the first lockdown, and it was to do with a particular brand of high-end perfume that had been stolen from a lorry on the M20 in Kent. This particular high-end perfume hadn't been released in the UK. It was in specific new packaging that wasn't here in the UK. The lorry parked up overnight. It was attacked, and I think probably 8 pallets of this perfume worth 7 figures, probably, or more than that, was stolen. We got called out by Kent Police in relation to offering them some advice and assistance. And then we quickly found out within 24 hours that there was 10 to 15 sellers of that stolen perfume across, as I say, multiple addresses and multiple counties within 24 hours. So we had 10 to 15 sellers across Essex, East London, Watford and Luton. And then within another 24 hours again after that, those sellers all on eBay go up again. So you're getting more sellers coming online. And then after 3 or 4 days, you can see that the goods have definitely been sold and they've gone and they've re-entered the supply chain and people have bought them, whether that's from a wholesaler or wherever they've bought them from. And as I said, within 3 or 4 days, 4 or 5 days, you could see that sellers in other areas of the UK were offering these goods on eBay for sale in Birmingham in the West Midlands. So I am speaking out loud now, but when I'd done stolen cars, I'd like to think, and probably my police bosses would probably agree, that I had quite a good record when it comes to recovery of stolen cars, recovery of stolen diggers, recovery of stolen tractors. And that's because you're always looking for that one big lump of shiny metal. And as I said, the challenge with cargo is that it once it's sold on, it quickly can be sold via various different means, all in smaller quantities.
Just into the ether, isn't it?
But on saying that, as I said last week, we recovered 5 lorry loads of goods in Doncaster. Last year with the recoveries, as I say, in Bradford 20. So we still have good success when it comes to those large recoveries, and particularly in the Bradford case, I can't go into much more detail, but 3 people's been arrested in relation to that, and that inquiry is still ongoing. So as I said, there is a lot of good work that is going on for those larger recoveries.
Yeah, it's I suppose sort of as I think about it and listen to you speak about it, these organised crime units they're smart, they're well organised, they know what they're doing, it's their business, they make it their business, and the only way to really tackle that is to have the data, isn't it? It's to have the data, to have the quick response, to be able to try and keep on top of the organised crime as much as possible.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor a Half Dozen Things podcast. At Flagship Partners, we take road safety really seriously, and we're your road safety partnership. We help transport companies with compliance and training across their businesses, including first aid, driver CPC and other transport management services. So if you're FORS accredited or you want to improve your operator compliance risk score, give Flagship Partners a call today.
And it's something that couldn't happen just based on local policing organisations, could it? Because it needs that sort of centralised approach to be able to tackle it, which is I think it's really good.
The people that are committing the thefts, a lot of the time, in my experience, they understand supply chains. They've either been from a heavy goods vehicle driving background, warehousing background, so they know which hauliers or which carriers have got contracts to move certain goods around the UK. They know which hauliers carrying certain goods will be forced to take certain routes with certain commodities. They understand driving hours. So they know which hauliers carrying certain goods will be forced to take rest breaks when they're doing those routes. So we've got a team of analysts at the National Vehicle Crime Intelligence Service that look at different patterns and trends. I've asked them to keep an eye and do some work around theft of commodity by region and theft of commodity by season, because we see particularly certain goods stolen from certain routes, and that's because I see the thefts that come through and get reported to us, and it's without doing any deep dive analytical trawl really. So for instance, we'll see electrical goods thefts of cargo around the M1, Milton Keynes, Leicester Way, and that's because of the tech companies that are off the motorways along those routes. Seasonal trends, year on year, again without doing any deep dive analytical trawl. I know that round about April, May time each year, we'll start seeing holiday accessories, sunglasses, camping equipment are stolen from lorries that are being delivered because they're the desirable items that families and people want for the summer holidays. Usually around September, October, computer and gaming consoles. The kids want the latest PlayStations and
ready
Xboxes
for Christmas.
So again, we see losses and thefts of those types of goods. So where that is really it's a big piece of work in itself. But we're currently in the stages of putting together. My detective chief inspector is currently writing a national problem profile for cargo crime and cargo theft. And some of the issues that I've mentioned, I've put forward for inclusion in relation to that report, so people get a greater understanding of how cargo crime operates and the organised crime groups that are committing offences.
Perfect. I think it leads me really well onto one of the things that really shocked me when I heard you speak at the Road Transport Expo was that the wording around approved and safe parking. I can't remember what the exact terminology is that's used, but that there's really only 2 in the UK. Are you able to just sort of explain that for listeners, if that's okay, Mike?
Yeah, we're having a real push at present in relation to, there's a massive difference between safe parking and secure parking. Our figures suggest that it's around 2,000 incidents per year are reported in independent road parking locations such as laybys, industrial estates. Around 1,000 each year are reported in motorway service areas, which would be deemed to be safe parking locations and motorway service stations. And we work with our partners at Welcome Break, Road Chef, Moto and Extra. They would be deemed to be safe because they're on the network. There should be hard standing. There should be adequate lighting. There may be an AMPR camera, there may be a CCTV camera, and despite that, there's around 1,000 incidents a year that are being reported in safe parking locations. Then you put next to it secure parking. again, an open source check would show you that there's around 500,000 heavy goods vehicle operators licenses in the UK. Some of those businesses will have one lorry, some will have multiple lorries. But it's safe to estimate that there's probably somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million lorries in the UK, including the European traffic. And despite that, there's only two, and I'll say that again, two truck stops in the whole of the UK that have got TAPA, the Transported Assets Protection Association secure parking accreditation. So you can see that there's a massive disparity in relation to the provision for secure parking and the amount of lorries that's on the road. Our partners at the Road Haulage Association believe that there's 12,000 spaces, not enough for lorries to park in the UK. And we've been doing a piece of work with the British Parking Association and the Department for Transport in relation to the British Parking Association are looking at trying to adopt a secure parking standard under the Parkmark scheme. So the British Parking Association run Parkmark, which was initially designed for your NCP city centre and town centre car parks to keep those safe, but they're looking at rolling out something called Parkmark Plus or Parkmark Truck, and that the around standards around secure parking for truck stops and motorway service stations. So we're obviously a big supporter in relation to that. Again, from the research that we've conducted, parking in Europe is subsidised by the government, and they've just invested. I think it's they're upgrading at present 28 or 29 motorway service stations across Europe from safe parking to secure parking using EU government funding. So these are all issues that we've put forward as part of the national problem profile that we're currently putting together. But our position is quite clear that if the UK does adopt a UK secure parking standard, it must be robust enough not just to deter your opportunist thief, but to deter organised criminal groups that are committing high value, seriously well organised offences, and that's in relation to the safe and secure parking.
Wow, it's crazy, isn't it? So TAPA is the standard that only two parking locations are accredited with. It's incredible, really, to think about that. That's about 500,000 vehicles per parking spot. So it's some statistic. Do you think it's something that I guess we need to kind of push for investment in infrastructure to improve the security of parking, essentially, is what the challenge is, and how, and like you say, it's okay to secure against the opportunist theft, but actually to secure against organised crime that's actually quite, in reality, a tricky thing to do that I imagine needs a lot of investment. What sort of features is that? If you know, what sort of features is that the secure parking needs over and above what you'd get in a sort of standard service station parking?
Well, just in relation to that, there is funding now that's been set aside. So the Chancellor last year in his budget put forward that he was going to invest in upgrading truck parking facilities for drivers. We all know, because of the COVID, because of the pandemic, because of I'll mention the word Brexit, that freight and cargo now is seen as being crucial to national infrastructure, and the government's recognised that. So we've currently been putting out on our fortnightly intelligence bulletins that there's some allocated funding through the Department for Transport and the Highways Agency that have allocated £52.5 million in the form of matched funding applications to upgrade motorway service stations and truck stops to upgrade not just the security but drivers' facilities, so your wash facilities and your rest facilities, etc., etc. So there has been recently, and again, we're encouraging. It has to be for existing parking operators to apply for that funding. But if anyone wants any information in relation to that, I can provide it. And they have said that it will be on the a matched funding. Well, priority will be given to projects that are offering matched funding in the form of the parking operator paying half and then applying for the government funding to do the others. But again, when in relation to your question, Peter, you look at the secure sites that already exist. There are, a lot of them operate on either a bronze, platinum, bronze, silver standard, or a level 1, level 2, or level 3 standard, and depending on what you've got at your truck parking site. So if you've got access control with facial recognition, AMPR, you've got palisade fencing all encompassed, roaming security guards. You might have a dog on patrol, the security dog that's patrolling round and about. You probably go into the higher levels of the secure parking standard, and there is a tick list, and it's all audited as to where you would sit. But I'm not talking out of turn as I say it. There are some parking sites where you've literally got a patch of tarmac with some lighting next to a green field. And this is what we're saying about the difference between, there's a massive difference between secure parking sites and safe parking sites. And as I say, our push is that until there is a secure parking standard adopted nationally for trucks, that would be a massive deterrent, and it would hopefully offer a big preventative measure when it comes to reducing and preventing any of these types of offences.
And sort of my brain sort of ticking along whilst you're speaking from a commercial point of view is, and sort of something I guess I'm realising is that a lot of the service stations, they're making good money out of their parking as it is at the standard it is. They're making good money, and actually the impact of crime isn't really on them either from a security point of view. And actually, is there the market for that much more expensive parking with all of the additional cost around the security? I guess from a commercial point of view, making it all stack up is probably a little bit of a challenge, because they're doing pretty well commercially anyway. Because if there's a supply and demand issue anyway, with 12,000 parking spaces short in the UK as it stands, these service stations are full night in, night out, regardless of the standard of security already. I guess is sort of where my head was going with that. So there's a bit of the incentive to invest is a bit of a challenge. Is that sort of a fair summary, or a fair sort of thought process around where we're at the moment?
There's no one size fits all, and it's a number of different factors, and it's not just one. But I had an interesting conversation with a supply chain manager from probably one of the biggest companies in the world. And they're quite open and forward thinking when it comes to this. And they said that sometimes the operators are more or less feeding the criminals, because they're constantly trying to drive down operators' costs, and in that there's not always room for sufficient parking fees or whatever for truck drivers to park. So by driving the operators' costs down, the big companies, and this isn't from Mike Dawber, this is from one of the biggest global businesses in the world. They said that probably needs to be looked at, that there should be some kind of margin put in there to ensure that trucks can park safely. As I said before, we get about 2,000 incidents a year in lay-bys and industrial estates. And if you put the 1,000 incidents a year at motorway service stations, just using that, you're probably twice as likely to become a victim of cargo theft if you park in a lay-by in an industrial estate rather than parking in a motorway service station. So the two people will probably ask on your podcast the two truck stops in the UK that have been very supportive of our work, that are TAPA accredited to level 3 TAPA, Formula Services in Ellesmere Port in Cheshire, and the Red Lion truck stop on the M1 at Northampton. And they're the only two that we're aware of that have got TAPA accreditation.
Excellent. That's it's fantastic that they've invested in it. But yeah, like you say, we almost need to review the whole supply chain process for rates to increase for operators, for them to, and then almost say we need to enforce that you stay in secure parking, and that's that's the level that you're going to be insured to, and then it kind of creates the demand and improves from there. That leads me on to my sort of next question, which is, if you had a magic wand to try and solve this challenge, what would your wish be with the magic wand?
I've already covered some of it, Peter. So the Home Office Crime Classification Code is our Home Office Counting Code for a cargo theft is one that if there was a magic wand that if that was achievable, it probably isn't achievable because as I said, educating 43 police forces, the changes that would have to come around in relation to that. But one of the things that we've put as a consideration is, and this is part of our national report that hopefully will be coming out later this year, is that if there can't be a Home Office classification code, that police forces consider tagging offences. So there's one national operation name. And again, this is off the top of my head, if it's called Operation Cargo, that police forces, call handlers, crime recording bureaus would be able to, if they get told that a lorry's been broken into, or there's been a curtain slashing, or a trailer, an articulated trailer, that everything's taglined under hashtag Operation Cargo, and that would make it more easier when it comes to pulling out cargo theft offences in the UK. That's one of the considerations. We've mentioned the real push that we're having in relation to the difference between safe and secure parking. I speak to the insurers in the City of London. I speak to the police bosses. And again, as the subject matter expert that's been looking at it for 4 years, until we've got a network of strategically placed secure parking sites across the UK, again, trying to get a large reduction in these offences is difficult. I've just seen this morning notification of real high value theft that's occurred in the last couple of days, and that's part of the reason for that coming about. It's a curtain slashing offence where a driver was forced to park in a lay-by because he couldn't make his intended destination, his truck parking location, and that came about because of a serious accident on the M5. So again, strategically placed secure parking sites would be the next one. And something that we haven't touched on during the podcast so far is one of the things that I say is that when I joined the police 20 years ago, people were still holding banks and building societies up with sawn-off shotguns and guns and doing armed robberies. Crime is constantly evolving, and criminals have moved away from that. Thankfully, touch wood, that doesn't happen very often anymore, whereas it was happening quite a lot when I first joined the police. And the reason for that was around sentencing. So if I was on the wrong side of the line and I go and hold a bank up, what am I going to get off the bank or the building society? You'd be lucky to get £5,000 or £10,000 in cash. If you do that and you get collared off the police, you'd be looking, and rightly so, at 15 to 20 years in prison, and rightly so. You put your own robbery and the penalties that exist for that next to a cargo theft. We had a lorry that was attacked at a motorway service station on the M40 18 months ago, and there was 1.7 million of cosmetics stolen from that lorry. That 1.7 million pounds worth of cosmetics was cost price. So with retail values, you're probably looking at 10 million pounds worth of cosmetics that was stolen. So cargo theft is seen as being very, very low risk. and very high reward if it's pulled off from the villain. So one of the things that we've been pushing on, we now supply business impact statements to police forces, so the courts can be in possession of the full facts of the case, and they can make informed decisions when it comes to passing sentences for these offences. So the last one would be to run alongside, if there was ever a Home Office counting code or a specific crime of cargo theft, adequate sentencing guidelines to run alongside that. So they're really the top three of my top of the pops of what I would ask for if I had a magic wand.
Amazing. No, fantastic. And that's something I'd not really thought about. Crime has and always will exist, and it does evolve, doesn't it? And it will evolve. And like you say, cargo theft. I grew up, I don't know if I said this when we spoke before, but my dad was a policeman for 30 years in Cambs Police. And I grew up, we had 2 key rings in the house for the internal doors, like for outside. And one of them said crime doesn't pay. And the other one said, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. They were like these 2 little sayings. And I sort of grew up with that mantra, sort of from a young lad. But actually just listening, cargo and freight crime, if you don't get caught, can pay by the sounds of it. It's pretty, commercially, it's pretty big business, isn't it? So one of the things, one of my final questions was around with all this information, what are your tips for operators? Have you got? I think you've sort of documented a handout there that people can go and look for. But what, if operators are listening and they want to try and protect themselves, what are the top tips really?
Well, we work in partnership with a business called Maple Fleet Services, and they provide free of charge to us to give out to all drivers the cargo and road transport security guides. We go out on driver engagement events, and we've done various motorway service stations and truck stops across the UK in the last couple of years to speak with drivers, to give education around how not to become a victim of cargo theft. But we have a saying, and it's in the cargo and road transport security guide, that cargo at rest is cargo at risk. So at any time that lorries are stopped, ensure that your vehicles are adequately secured. As we say, if you can, try and pick the highest category of truck parking when it comes to secure. We've mentioned about secure and safe parking locations. Always have delivery policies. Some businesses are moving, not these days, but in the last years gone by, we're moving vast quantities and high value quantities of goods. Thankfully, businesses have adapted now, and they've got delivery policies and security policies and whatever else. And I still see, it says in this in the cargo and road transport guide that keep details private. I still see various drivers from time to time putting on social media where they are, where they're driving to, what they're carrying. And again, we have that saying that loose lips sink ships. We mentioned around planning ahead before. Sometimes with driver's hours, it's difficult, but if you can plan ahead and try to get to your nearest, safest parking location to park for the evening. But if anyone wants any information in relation to the cargo and road transport security guides, if you either shout out to myself or Peter, we can obviously direct you to the people that produce this.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike. Mike, I think that's been fantastic having you on. I really, really appreciate it, and it's been really interesting. I've learned loads from this session, and I learned loads from you when you spoke at the Road Transport Expo. So it's amazing to sort of be able to broaden my understanding. Just finally, before we go, we've been chatting football, yourself and me, when we've been sort of lining up the podcast, and I was really interested to hear about the goal that your lads got. Are you able to just sort of share that a little bit for the listeners, please, mate?
Yeah, I'm a Wigan Athletic season ticket holder, and my son is 13, 14 years old now, and for the last 4 or 5 years, He's had a goal to do the 92 Football League grounds. So he's up to about 46 now out of the 92. I'll probably be dead and buried by the time he achieves it all. But we're going tomorrow. I know, Peter, you're a Man United fan for your sins. But we're going to Norwich tomorrow to watch the game, which is on TV tomorrow. And yeah, that's what I like to do in my spare time, with the occasional round of golf. But before I sign off, can I just say that, as I said earlier, we're going back to work-related things. We're a national police unit, but we're entirely industry funded. None of this work would exist. I would be sat here. I don't know. I doubt that anyone would be looking at cargo theft if it wasn't for the generous business relationships, partnerships, memberships that we have. If anyone's interested in being a NaVCIS member, in getting involved in the work that we're doing around cargo theft, in getting our reports, our fortnightly intelligence bulletins, our monthly, quarterly and annual reports, please either drop myself or Peter a message, and I'm sure that we can sort something out. So thanks very much, Peter, for having me.
Oh, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think I'll sign off with saying I hope your lad does it all. And if you haven't done the posh ground, give me a shout when you do come to Peterborough, because it'll be good. I'm taking the kids to see Peterborough in the next couple of weeks. They're playing Lincoln, which is like a local derby for the guys here. But yeah, finally, I'd just like to say I think it's a great opportunity for people to become NaVCIS members, and I think that's a really vital part of you getting that data and being able to share that data with operators as well as those top tips as well. So what I'll do is, if you don't mind, Mike, I'll get a link. Is there like a sign-up link or something I can put on the show notes for the podcast that people can, when they listen to this, they can click on the link and go and find out more about becoming a member and sign themselves up? If we put that in the show notes, then people can find that easily when they've listened to this podcast and think, do you know what, that'll be a good investment, and I'd like to be part of the NaVCIS members group. So does that sound good?
Sounds good to me. Thanks very much for your help, Peter.
No worries at all, Mike. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And to the listeners, I hope you've enjoyed it. And please do share it with other people. It's fantastic to grow the listenership. So thank you very much. Cheers, Mike.
Thank you.
I really hope you loved today's episode. And if you did, please make sure you subscribe and listen out for future episodes too. Please do share it across your social media channels. We hope to reach more and help more people. If you want to find out more about me, my name's Pete Rushmer. You'll find me across any social media channel and my business Flagship Partners, and we're your partners in success across your business. Thank you. See you again soon.